Welcome back to Sprinkle with Hope podcast with your host, Jason. And Shane and I, we love doing ones where it's just him and I chatting. We haven't done one for a while. And we've just thought, over the last little bit that we wanted to do some. So hopefully you enjoyed the last episode about our Disney talks, and I hope you're making your next vacation plans. Shane and I love that. So we hope that you're doing that, whether it's at Disneyland or somewhere else. Doesn't matter. But today's episode, we're going to be talking about working to understand people or understanding others and what that kind of means. So, right off the bat, I'm hitting you guys with a quote because we love those. But Nicolas Cage, who's an American actor, said, "Understanding is deeper than knowledge. There are many people who know you, but very few who understand you." And I just thought that was really a cool way to put it, in that you can know somebody, but do you really understand them? And the understanding is really a lot more complex, deeper rooted in your knowledge of who they are as a person. And when you understand somebody, I mean, the relationship is such that it's built well. You can really work together closely, and you kind of know where they stand on certain issues. So Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, you may or may not know about that, but it's like a pyramid, right? And some may say, why do I bring up the hierarchy of human needs when we're talking about understanding others? And so here's what I want you guys to get from this. When we know what motivates a person or people, we can start to understand why they make the decisions that they make, right? So if we understand this hierarchy of human needs, then we can really understand what it is that's driving them to do or make those decisions and do what they do, right? So starting at the bottom of the pyramid, we start with physiological needs, right? Food, water, warmth, rest, shelter, those kinds of basic human needs. One level up from that is safety, which is your health or your social stability. You're feeling safe and not in harm's way. Up from that is belonging and love needs. So this would be any intimate relationships, family, friends, loved ones, whatever those relationships are. Just that feeling of belonging and love and those needs. The fourth level is the esteem needs. So this is confidence, achievement, accomplishment, doing those things that you feel confident in doing, right? And that's how that one works. And then the last level is self actualization, which means achieving one's full potential, including their creative activities. So, if you look at that in a pyramid, the first two are basic needs. The next two are psychological needs, and the last one is self fulfillment. So if you kind of broke it up into thirds, that's how it would look. And so if you understand that maybe somebody's at the lowest level, they're just trying to survive. And so that's driving them to do the decisions that they need. They're in this mode where they just are in survival mode, and they're not thinking about having the confidence or achieving something, right? Because that's way up the pyramid. So they're a lot lower than that. So if you understand what's driving them, you can say, "Oh, I get it now. They're not at maybe the level where they need to be. So how can I help them get to that level? Can I help them feel love and needed and those kinds of things?" So that's kind of how I wanted to start this episode off.
That's really awesome stuff. Well, surprise, surprise. Guess what I'm going to start off with? Drum roll, please. Yes, it's a quote by Beau Taplin. He's an author, and he says this. I loved how he says this. We are so desperate to be understood, we forget to be understanding.
Mm,
And I love that because we're talking about understanding people more and those type of things. And so I agree with him. Too often we want people to understand us, but we don't reciprocate that understanding with them. We look at it from our standpoint. And so some of the tips that I want to offer today are geared more towards looking out from yourself to others and really tying into that quote that I shared. The first thing that I thought was, don't judge others or make assumptions about them.
Mm.
Again, all too often we first judge people, so we automatically put them in that category, and we think we know who they are, and then we make assumptions about them above that. So not only are we judging them, but we're assuming that we know about them or know the things that they want. And I would caution each of us to not do any of those things, to first not judge people. And I think if you do that, then you'll have a better understanding of them. And then if you don't make assumptions about them, that's where you'll start to begin to understand them as a person. We all have our unique differences, and that should be celebrated and not uh, something that we frown upon, or those type of things. Another thing that I was thinking as I was thinking about this was, be fully present. So as you're talking to someone, maybe you're getting to know them initially, or you know them pretty well. But one thing that drives me crazy when you're talking to somebody is if they're on their cell phone or a device and they don't look up and make eye contact with you. That's what I mean by being fully present. Put your cell phone down, make eye contact with the person, to show them that you want to understand them. You want to hear them, not only what they're saying, but you want to feel what they're saying. And I think if we don't put our cell phone or our device down, how can we really be fully engaged in what they're saying? And so I think often we lose the misunderstanding comes when we think we're hearing what we're hearing, but we're actually too in, engulfed in our other things that are distracting us. Another thing that I was thinking about was perspective, and Jason and I have talked about this a lot, that perspective is a really interesting thing. We've shared, if you're standing in front of a 6 or a 9 and you're on the opposite side, you might be thinking that one person is seeing it differently, but they're just seeing it from a different perspective. And I came across this quote, and I don't know who said it, but I loved it. I wanted to share it. It says this: it's as if everyone in the world were standing around a giant statue of an elephant. If you are describing the trunk to someone who is looking at the tail, you are bound to have a misunderstanding.
Mm.
And I love that, because I could picture a lot of us standing on opposite sides of this elephant, and I'm describing to the people on the opposite side what I'm seeing, which could be the trunk, and they're seeing the tail, which looks very different. And that doesn't mean that I'm right or they're wrong, or they're right and I'm wrong. It's simply that if you look at people in a different perspective and you start to do the things that we're going to be talking about, then you'll see them in the light that they're designed to be, which is who they are. And I think if we do that, then we eliminate all those opportunities to be misunderstood or misunderstand people. And the last thing I want to share with in this part is to read body language. Now, I was talking to my wife about something similar the other night. We were talking about vacations, and that often our parents would drive through the night to go on vacation, and most of the kids would fall asleep, and I felt like I couldn't, partly because I was a little bit scared that we would crash, but I wanted to stay up and talk to my dad at the time. And that's really when I started realizing that I caught on to people's body language, because as he was getting tired, I was like, Dad, you're tired. And he's like, how do you know? I'm like, I can just read you. I can tell that that's how you're acting. And I was probably maybe 14 or 15 at the time, but that's when I started to realize that I was tapping into reading body language. And it's been very important to me since that point. And I think if we do that, as we're talking to people, we don't judge them, we don't make assumptions, we're fully present. So we drop our cell phone or device. So we're engaged with them. We look at them from a different perspective, and then we start to read their body language. We're going to open up great possibilities of understanding people better.
I love that you brought that up. It just gave me a good memory of our old van driving through the night, and I would be in the back asleep, and then I wake up and wait, we're in California or whatever already. What
Yep.
happened?
Yep.
I love that you shared that, and I love that that you shared some of those examples and quotes and things, because I think it's important. That helps us kind of grasp how to understand people better. So Stephen Covey once said that we should first seek to understand someone before trying to be understood. Sometimes we're always quick to be, no, you got to understand what my point of view is before we try to understand the other person. And I think it's beneficial when we do it the other way. In fact, I know it is, right? I've used this in my life when okay, let me understand your point of view first. Okay, I see what you're saying. This is what I'm kind of thinking, right? Instead of going the other way around, like, no, 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 you're wrong. You got to listen to what I'm saying. And then it just is like this back and forth, and you never come to any conclusion, right? Because you're just always trying to be right as opposed to understanding them. So if we will take the time to listen to others and their needs, we can become better just in general in society, and we can really create those relationships which we seek and long for as we are kind to others and show them the love that we have. That will help us to create a better world that we're in. One of the key components that I was thinking about when we first talked about this subject was understanding empathy. And I think when we can understand empathy, that will allow us to understand people better, because they may have a different point of view, and feeling that empathy and understanding where they're at. So what is empathy? Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, right? Another human being. And so here's kind of some of the four key points. And one of them is the very first one is the same that Shane already talked about. But hey, nothing like just reiteration, right? It
Yeah.
just solidifies it in your brain. So here's the four things that I thought about. One, pick up on their cues, which is to say their body language, their nonverbal form of communication, right? The way that they talk and present themselves. I often tend to use my hands a lot, right? Whereas others may not. But you can kind of clue in on some of that body language. Often, if people are folding their arms, right, that's like a sign of defensive. So maybe allow them to feel comfortable, and that you want to communicate with them. Let them bring their guard down just a little bit. Second thing is listening well. We've talked about this multiple times, but do we often really listen to another person? Do we really grasp what they're saying, or do we just try to interject our thoughts and our ideas and say, no, no, no? Kind of like what I was saying, right? That I'm right, you're wrong. That's not how a conversation should go. We should really learn to listen well. And I'm a culprit of this. I've had this happen before, and I've seen a difference between when you actually really try to listen and when you're just trying to interject your thoughts and ideas. Number three is show sensitivity towards another. So this would be, honesty, politeness, tact. You know, that being tactful is a huge component to showing that empathy and really understanding people. Often I think people just blurt out whatever is on their mind and not using that tact. But I think there's a way to be honest and tactful at the same time. And then the last thing is that I have, the fourth thing is help others. And Shane and I love helping people. We love allowing them to share their thoughts, their ideas, really allowing them to speak what they have in their mind, that we might be able to gain some better insights, clarity around what it is that they're working with, what's the struggle in their life. I just have one little last example of empathy, and then I'll turn it back to Shane. But here's a real story. Okay, so the owner of Huggies, Kimberly Clark, the owner of Huggies, sent observers to families' homes to see how they interacted with their kids and if there was anything more that could be done. Because they started Huggies and they weren't sure, like, okay, let's go into the homes and see what's happening here. So, what they found was parents really needed a better way to teach their children how to be independent between the stages of when they were in diapers and when they were in regular pants. So, what does this have to do with empathy? Well, this is what spawned the creation of Huggies pull ups. She went into their homes and said, there's just not a really good like way to get from diaper to not diaper. And they were having this huge struggle. But because she was empathetic and wanted to feel what the parents were feeling, she went into their homes and did this experiment and said, "Wow, yeah." So if they were in a pull up, and the kid learned the ability to pull up their pants or take them off, that would help them move from diaper to not diaper. And so that's really where the Huggies pull ups comes from. Was that I just wanted to share with you guys like a real world story of how showing empathy, even in a big company, can help people to just have a better life in society and to continue to work together. So that's the last part of my thought.
That's awesome. That's a really cool story. If I could build on empathy, because I had some about that, like you had mentioned, it's the ability for us to understand and share the feelings of another. If you're one that people come to, that where they tell you their problems or their frustrations, or they come to you for advice, chances are you have empathy towards them. They're not going to come to you and share their deep problems or concerns or ask for advice if you haven't shown empathy with them in the past, because they'll be a little bit guarded and won't want to share those really dark and deep feelings with you. So if you have people coming to you, then keep doing what you're doing. If you don't, there are some things that you can do to develop that empathy. And it's things that we're talking about. It's looking at them in a different light and really engaging with them as they talk to you, and showing them that they're in a safe place if they're with you, sharing anything. It could be talking about something simple, but the more trust and respect they gain from you, they're they're going to realize that you have empathy and will open up more to you. I think we can also appreciate our differences, kind of like I mentioned earlier, that the differences we have should be celebrated. They shouldn't be frowned upon. I think all too often in society, we look at others that might look or act differently than us. And I think it's awesome that we're all so unique and our own. Don't stop being you, be who you are, and also celebrate those around you who are acting who they are, and build them up and lift them up and encourage them to be who they are. I honestly believe of the more we do that, the world is going to become a better place. And something that I learned years ago with my wife as we were going through some counseling is reflecting back on what you heard the person say. So if we're having a conversation, you can say, Jason, I think you said this. And Jason can say, yeah, that's what I said. So it's a good way to reflect on what you actually heard, instead of saying, oh, I assume I know what I heard and I'm going to go off on this tangent, and maybe you didn't actually hear what they were saying. So you can reflect back to them and say, if I understand you correctly, this is what you're saying. And they could say yes, or clarify, that's not quite what I was saying, but you're close. So it's a good way to understand them more. And the last thing I wanted to share was to learn to understand yourself better.
Mm,
And when I say that, I'm meaning if we understand who we are, who we really are, we can understand people better. That's honestly how I feel. The better we understand ourselves, the more we'll have all of the stuff that we've talked about. I honestly, truly believe that. So tap into yourself and start to get to know yourself better. No matter who you are, celebrate yourself. Be excited for who you're becoming, Every day is an opportunity to become a better version of yourself, not to become a version I want you to be or anyone else wants you to be, but somebody who you want to be. I shared this on social media the other day from Hank Smith, who's a motivational speaker and an author. And he says, one of the secrets of a happier life, if you disagree with somebody, you don't have to tell them. And that struck me so much because often I think if we disagree with somebody, we want to first say, oh yeah, I don't agree with that viewpoint or your stance on this or that. We don't have to share our disagreement with people every single time. I choose not to do it on social media simply because I choose social media as a platform to spread hope and light and love and positivity. That's how I'm going to always be. So whether you follow me or not on social media, that's how I am, and I'm not going to steer away from that because that's who I am. I really love sharing all the things that I do. When I saw that from him, I thought that's so true. And that's a reason why I don't disagree, especially on social media, with those that I disagree with, because I don't need to. I don't have to do that. I don't even do that in real life. And so it just really struck me that I think sometimes we fall in that trap of wanting to disagree with everybody when there's a disagreement, but we don't necessarily have to tell them. And then the last quote I have is from Marvin J. Ashton. He was a politician and then became a church leader. He says this: be the one who has an understanding and a forgiving heart, one who looks for the best in people. Leave people better than you found them. And that kind of ties into these vacations that we would go on with our family when we were growing up, that our parents would always say, if we went camping, leave the campsite better than when we got there. And I've extended that to not just be the physical place that we're in, but the people that we interact with. Everybody we come in contact with, we should leave them better than we found them. If we do that, we understand them more. We're going to start to create a better world for everybody. I honestly, truly believe that. I think it's important to understand people better. And I'm glad that we had some insight into ways that we have worked on to develop this understanding and these things that we've worked on. Again, I think it's such an important thing to do, is to understand each other better.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Shane. And I missed a quote, so I wanted to make sure I get it in here because I thought it was really, really good. And it kind of goes along with your quote about judging others, or your discussion around that. So it's an anonymous quote. I don't know who it was from, but I love the way that it's very simply put. It says, "Those who judge never understand, and those who understand never judge." And I just thought that was so good. It kind of wrapped up the whole concept of understanding other people. So if we understand another person, then we would never judge them. But because we don't, we judge them first. And so that's kind of the concept behind that quote. And I just I wanted to make sure that I get it out there, and that you guys can use that. Use the things that we're talking about in your life. Don't just say, "Oh, that was a nice thought," or "That was a cool quote," or things like that. Really use these to make your life better, make the life of another person better. That's the ultimately what we want to do, right? We complain a lot about, "Oh, that person said this bad thing," or "This person does that." Well, why don't we do our part and make the world better that we're around us? Make the people that are around us better, understand them more, create the environment you would like, and then it will naturally come to you. So that I'm glad Shane and I had this discussion today. Hopefully you got something from it. Please use it if you did, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to us